Okay, here we are for a brand new semester of EPSY 3300. From time to time, we have problems with students understanding the link, how to get the link to the course. The most important thing of the course, is the web page. I'm going to put the web address up on here. I'm confident that it will be the web address for as many semesters as this tape runs. I'm going to write it down. If you don't have it, everything you need to know about the course is at this web address, www.courses.edu/EPSY 3300. Okay, there's the address. I think it's big enough to see. Okay, and everything you need to know is on that website. Okay, come back to me. If you don't have DVDs, well, you have it if you're looking at this, right? But if you have any question about purchase, about anything, call the number that's on there. Once again, I urge everyone, I'm fairly confident that this policy will not change in the number of semesters that this tape is running. There are two numbers on there. One of them is for technical matters. If you write me about a technical matter, where's my paper, I didn't get my paper back, I didn't get a grade, I'm not being stubborn. I don't know the answer to the questions. Okay, there are several doctoral students who serve as co-teachers, teaching assistants. Some of them will be teaching some of the sessions, okay? And they handle all of that because they do it better than I do, okay? If you have questions about course content, you can either ask one of them, especially if one of them is given the lecture for the course, or you can write to me at the email address on there. Okay, if you write to me at any other personal email address that you may have dug up, I'm not going to answer it because do it there, okay? So you go on the web page and you get all the information that you need. Okay, I think that's all. And of course, assignments, etc., etc. Everything is on there, and they will be able to handle all the technical details for you. Let me say that there are assignments that need to be mailed in. Okay, the semester that this is being taped, the price of stamps went up. I have noted that there's a likely chance by the time we're done it'll go up again, right? This tape will run a couple of years probably. So be sure you have enough stamps. Don't use, if you want your papers back, you have to put in enough stamps. You'll see that. I'm just warning you. Don't say, I weighed this. I need $1.50 worth of stamps to send it in. And then there's a return envelope. Put 40 cents worth of stamps or 50 cents worth of stamps. Okay, be sure that you'll see it all on there. Okay. Follow closely for times, for sites, etc., etc. For everything, all the information that you need is there, and if it's not, you can send an email. Okay, are there any questions anybody has? Next time we have a session, I'm going to rely on people who are taking the course live now to go onto the web page to go over it thoroughly. You'd better go over it thoroughly, okay? And then if there anything that's not clear, come back and ask the questions, and I'll update the web page, and then I can answer them face to face. Now, and as I said, the format doesn't change that much over the semesters. There's one thing on the web page. I'm not too good at fiddling with web pages. There's something called an internet assignment. Okay, and I don't know how to get rid of it. I have every confidence there will not be another one. By the time I make a new tape, if I make a new tape. Okay, that was a project that we got a little money for, and we did it for a few years. And now it petered out just before we got it to where we wanted to get it. One day maybe we'll get it back up. But so just you can ignore them. There's a thing out of there, no internet assignment this. If it says no internet assignment this semester, then don't worry about it. If it doesn't say that, we've taken it up again. But there's a place that says written assignments. That's where all the assignments that you need to do are. You just click on that part, and that's where the assignments are. Okay. Next week, next session, I'll take questions. Right now, it doesn't pay since you haven't all read the web page. Okay. Let me say that on the web page there are PowerPoint slides. Okay. The slides that I'm going to give you. They may not be exactly the slides that you see on television, because I'm always piddling with them, and I may have actually piddled for this semester, I don't remember, but certainly in semesters, if you're taking this several semesters after it was taped, then there may be a slight difference, but it's not enough to make a difference. And that's your main study guide for the test, the PowerPoint slides. Okay? If you want to print the PowerPoint slides in color, the way they appear, go out and buy 7 cartridges. Okay? And it may work. Okay? And you may get halfway through. What you need to do with the PowerPoint slides is print them on black and white. You'll see there that there's a place to print them black and white. Because some of them, like, they have a red background. You'll use up a cartridge just doing the red background or the blue background of the slide. There's none with a red background, but get the point. Okay, and then you can print them as much as you want. Okay, if you are taking it live or even by tape, okay, if you printed 3 slides to a page, you will notice that there are lines next to it where you can take notes by each slide. So it's up to you, and they're the review for the course. Some of them are pretty comprehensive reviews, some of them are not as good reviews, so you'll have to listen to the tape. Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Order on how we're going to be seeing them in class?
Yes. No, are the slides in order? No, you'll just have to click on PowerPoint. You'll have to identify the name of the slides. Because the slides are, the PowerPoint shows are listed in alphabetical order. Okay? And I'm obviously not going in that order. But once you, in a program, yeah, it's the same slideshow. It's not quite in order. No, that's a good question. No, they're not in order because, you have to duck, don't get in the camera. Okay, they're not in order because I have links. Okay? So if you want to know whether you can pass the course, without listening or without watching the tapes, the answer is probably no. I also want to warn you, obviously, there are a couple of sets of the tapes in the reference room in the library of the DVDs now. So far, no one has managed to pass the course, as far as we know, by going the last week or two and trying to watch the whole course by borrowing from the library. Okay, the word has spread. The first couple semesters I taped, we had 15 people lined up for the tapes. There are only a couple of sets. Okay, so I would advise you strongly to come to the sessions. The broadcast schedule, if you're taking the course live or taking the course live, then the broadcast schedule is on the tape. And if you miss something, you can watch the broadcast. Again, it's on the web page. Okay. Let me, okay, go ahead. Push the button down.
The bookstore is saying that your book is not listed. Is there no book, or?
No, there's a book on the web.
Okay.
There's a book on the page. There are 2 books. You go on the page and you look. Again, I'm not supposed to say anything that dates this, so I don't know if there'll be 2 books a few semesters from. Go on the website and you'll see the books. Okay, they're listed in several places. Semester that's being recorded, it's 2 books. I don't know if it'll change or not, but just go there and you'll see the books. Okay? All right. As long as the books came up, I want to say something about the books. You're required to buy a new book. Here's the deal. Okay? The deal is you're required to buy a new book. There's a tear-out page from the book, and you have to hand in the tear-out page. Okay? Here's the reason why. I explained on the web page, but I'll explain it more in detail. Okay? There is basically a war on, I use that word advisedly, between sellers of used books and new books. Okay? Publishers and the used booksellers. Has anybody ever bought, okay, roughly the book, a new bookseller at the most will up the cost to itself another 33%. So if they buy a book For $66, they'll charge you $99 if that's their wholesale price, right? If their price is let's make it reasonable, $44, they'll add another $22 on, and they'll charge you $66. Very hard to find a book that price, right? Has anyone ever bought a textbook for $90, $95, $100, $120, right? Everybody, okay? And what do you get when you sell it back? What? Do they give you $30? What? If you're lucky, right? Now, okay, so you bought a book for $110. They give you $30, $35 for it. And when you go back to buy it, maybe $25. When you go back to buy a used book in the big store, it costs how much? $75, $80? Well, that's close to... So instead of up a third, they're up 300%. Instead of selling a book that cost them, right, that cost them $20 for $30, they're selling it for $80, right, or $70. That is why, and of course that's a constant war, that is why you get edition 1, edition 2, edition 3, edition 4, edition 5 of textbooks. Okay? If you look at edition 6 and edition 4, there's not that much difference. The outside is pretty different. The pictures may be different, and the cover's different, and the exercise is different, but the information is not that much different. But the new book publishers have to constantly keep putting out new editions of their book. That's one reason they're so expensive. Okay? They have to constantly put out new editions of their book in order to keep the used book market from drowning them. One time they put out a new edition just before I taped. And I called up the representative. I said, look, I've got all my assignments, everything on the webpage, everything was from the old edition. Can you just send it to me for one more semester? And she started to laugh hysterically, like I was, like I told the world's biggest success. What, are you crazy? I said, no, we're not going to do that. He said, we can't do that, right? We made a calculation. We can't afford used books going around for one more semester. And, of course, what she's telling me is, we know that the market is saturated enough so that if we send you the used book for one more semester, there are going to be so many used books out there, we're not going to pay anything. She just thought I was ridiculous asking the question. So I use a small to medium publisher for one of the books that I use. Think is the one I'm pretty confident will be used. If it's not on the webpage, forget about it, but for the semester I'm taping, I'm going to use it, and it's a book I put together. And I went to a publisher, and the publisher is an academic publisher, and he himself is an academic. Now, was for a while, he was chair of he was the dean of a department at a community college. He's an academic. And he said to me, look, what I can do, he said, you have two choices. I can play that game, and then the new books will be, $80, $90. Or we can have a format where if you can guarantee me that every student, every semester that you have will buy the books, I'll put them out for you. Now, I don't have that big a student body. I mean, they need tens of thousands ordinarily, but he's a small publisher. He said, I'll do it for you. And he takes a small profit. Okay? So the cost of the book new, right, and he tries to keep the cost of the book new at or below what a typical book of readings or textbooks would be used, right? That's sort of the goal, okay? Because of the way the industry works, okay, the royalties, he pays royalties. The royalties that would come to me from the book, right, I don't take. I donate them to and I think Dr. Gore Laird also donates them to a fund we've set up for single parents with custody. Okay, students who are single parents, for a scholarship fund. Okay, she worked for many years at DePelchin with parents in that bracket, and I was one of those. Okay, so it's close to our heart. Okay, and we've. So we don't make any money on it. And of course, because of the nature of the business, insists upon the royalties, but I don't even see, the money is made out right to the University of Houston, to the scholarship fund. Oh, yes?
I'm not sure everybody realizes that you co-wrote the book.
Yeah. One of the books, I probably will be using the same two books. One is called Think. That we'll probably be using. I didn't write it, actually. It's a book of readings that I compiled. And the other book that I'm using during this semester, my name is not on it, but I was kind of the brains behind it, but don't say anything, okay? I do get some small royalties for that, too, and again, those are donated. I don't get them. They go right to the... But there's some of the publishers. He's a very honest person, and he's straightforward, and as I said, he's an academic. So the purpose of this is to keep the book cheap, but don't buy a used book. Otherwise, because he said to me, you want to go to used books? Fine, I'll just have to make the book $90. That's all, he said, like everybody else's. Yeah, go ahead.
It's not in the bookstore.
The books are not in the bookstore?
No.
All right, we'll settle that. This is obviously we're not supposed to say anything to date this semester, but they're not. Well, we'll handle it. I'll go to the bookstore and see what's going on. Okay. I'm not supposed to say anything about any other bookstore, but you're smart enough to figure it out for yourself. Okay. All right. I'll go and see what's going on. Okay. So I hope you understand that. That's the reason for that policy. It keeps the book cheaper than the average used book. And you have to understand, because the used books come out constantly. There's always one semester where if you buy a new book, you're stuck with it because the new edition is coming out. And there are some authors actually putting out a new edition every 18 months, 2 years, because it's just... And I've sort of picked classic kinds of things and classic issues. And, this is a segue to the course, issues that you may not hear in some of the other courses. I'll give you an example. Since IQ tests have come out in all their history, there has been a huge body of literature and criticism from the testing community and even more from the science community that they're worthless. Okay? You don't hear that in most of your courses. You'll hear that in this course. Okay? Okay. There are, and you'll see it in the book, okay? There are a large number of people who question whether standardized testing is the way to judge whether your education has succeeded or not. You may hear that in other courses, because almost every educator agrees to that, but you're going to hear that a lot in this course. Okay? There are a lot of people who question whether learning material is what education ought to be about. Shock you? You probably won't hear that in other courses, too many other courses. You may, but you're going to hear that in this course. And you're going to see a lot of that in the book. Just as a matter of interest, by the way, I have a few class rules. One of them is if I ask a question for a vote, you have to vote. I don't care how you vote. Most of the times it doesn't matter how you vote, because it's questions of opinion, but you have to vote. If you're taking this by tape, right, I have a direct link with an angel who watches you. Vote. All right? Just even, you don't have to raise your hand, but you can do it in your heart. Okay. How many people think that learning material is a very, very learning material, learning what's in this is a very, very important part of education? Raise your hand. That learning stuff is a very, very important part of education. Anybody think it's not? 2 people. All right, we'll get to that later. I got to ask. Why not? If you start to say something that gives it away, I'm going to shut you up. Okay, we have to push down the button. Push down on the button on the microphone.
I think it's more so not about learning, but understanding.
Okay. That's enough. Let me just say right away, I don't want to get to that. That is one of the alternative theories, right? People say it's not learning, it's understanding. What do you think?
I think ultimately it's part of it, but it should be not the emphasis, simply because what you find is a lot of people who are able to spit back information but aren't able to generate ideas and concepts with that information.
Okay. Those are sort of the 2 people. I don't want to say too much more. I don't want to give away the whole course, right? But those 2 people sort of gave, there wasn't quite the same answer, but this idea of understanding what you're talking about, or that knowledge needs to be generative, creative, etc., etc. The rest of you all thought it's very important. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in and at random and go back into your files, and I'm going to find teachers that taught you in 10th grade. I don't know what it's going to be. It might be a biology teacher, it might be a history teacher, it might be a math teacher, and we're going to pick a test that you took and passed during the 10th grade. I guess you all graduated high school. You're all here, right? Okay? And I'm going to give you that test. Maybe a math test, maybe a biology test, maybe a history test, maybe an English test. I'm going to give you that test. If you pass the test, I'll make you a deal. It's even a test you got a B on. If you pass the test, I'll give you an A for the course and finished. Right? You don't have to. Either way, it's good for me. I don't have to read your papers, right? If you fail the test, I'll give you an F for the course and finished. Who's ready to take that bet from me? You really? You sure? Push it down. You sure you remember everything? You sure you remember everything you remembered in high school that well?
Yes, sir.
He remembers. Okay. Most of you are not ready to take the bet. So what you're saying is the purpose of education is to give knowledge, is to impart knowledge that the successful students, by definition you're successful students because they graduate high school and you're in college, will forget anyway. Gee, what a great thing. You've got to learn this and pass it on the test so that when it comes to going to college, you won't remember it anyway. Most of you are pretty convinced that you can't remember it, with one exception, right? I used to be the world's best sentence diagrammer in the world, the best one. My wife teaches English, and she shows the kids how to diagram sentences and they can do it. I said, man, give me that. Took one of her tests, 62. Don't ask. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I kind of was faced with this because I had to take the THEA in order to get into the program for teaching education. Now, it's been a lot of years since I've done a quadratic equation. Since I did a quadratic equation or anything like that. But I passed the test the first time through, but I knew that I was going to fail going into it because there was no way I could remember that. But I did pass, so I surprised myself.
There you go. It's because sometimes you remember more than you think, but quadratic equations and all that stuff. Some of the stuff I remember, that I think I can do, but some of the other stuff, proofs in geometry, oh, God. All right. You take geometry?
Yes.
You think you could pass a geometry test now?
Yes.
Push it down, yeah?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. I'm so tempted to bring a challenge. We'll do that in private, okay? So you get the point here. So what we're going to do, let's go to the PowerPoint, the overhead projectors now. I'm sorry this is small, but I want to get it. Okay, so a lot of the courses that you've taken in your education studies will be geared toward answering the question, how? Methods courses. Very important courses. Listen. All right? Most people who teach, is there a way to get my picture in the corner? Well, wait till we're off of this. You know, most people who teach just do what they remember. Listen to what the people there are telling you, because they're vital to your training. But it would seem that an educator can't really implement effective teaching methods. Is there a way to get my picture in the corner? Is there a way to get my picture up there? You're working on it? Oh, thanks. Oh, I pointed to the wrong person. There you go. Unless the person is familiar in how kids think and learn, how are you going to implement something unless you know how to get the kids to learn it? Okay? This will be an essential instrument. For instance, you know, you say, oh, I know one way to get kids to learn. You'll put the book under their pillow and they'll absorb it in their sleep. Not too good. And you know what you're trying to accomplish. And probably you ought to know why you're trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. The main reason is because that's what they told you to do. But teachers, once they get experience, they become an underground movement doing what they think is important. Okay, so this course is going to deal with questions of what an educator is trying to achieve and how best to go about these goals. Okay, a lot of the messes that you're going to see, if you think, for instance, that learning information is very important, then you're going to have methodologies that are going to help you do that. If you think understanding is important, you're probably going to have different methodologies. You're going to have to do that. I'll give you another one just to give you a hint. If you think that emotional health of the children is important, okay, then you're probably going to have different methodologies to try to do that, or it's going to influence your methodology. Okay? Methods need to serve a purpose. You got it? They need to serve a purpose. You have to ask, why are you doing what you're doing? Okay? So we're going to ask this question, guys. What's the purpose of schools and education in general? What am I trying to achieve? And let me, here, come back to me for a second. Let me just say that education I define very broadly. It's anyone who's trying to change people's behaviors, ideas, attitudes, etc., etc. So, for instance, if you're in nutrition, why are you trying to be an educator? Right? I've been hearing for years the foods I shouldn't eat. This is probably because most of the people taking this course before we were born. But I'd like that. Yeah, I'd like this. So that's, how do you get people to really change their behavior? Okay? There's some people here. How many people here are hopeless procrastinators? Gee, I got a lot of hands going up. I might add, by the way, procrastinators tend to be fairly good achievers. Okay? So how many people are procrastinators would love not to procrastinate? Okay, how many people have read books and methodologies and study habits that teach you how not to procrastinate? Yeah, did they work? No. Right? Okay? So anytime you're trying to change people's eating habits, not just you're trying to change people's psychological approach to things, you're trying to have people stop being depressed or nervous or anxious about things, that's what I call an educator. To me, education is a very broad definition. And that, by the way, is the reason why, for instance, counseling psychology is in the College of Education. That makes perfect sense to me anyway. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint with my picture in the corner if you can. Okay? Second is, why am I doing what I'm doing? I have to have a reason to think it'll work. Okay? Why are you having the kids write the word down 50 times? By the way, a terrible thing to do. We'll get to that. Terrible thing to do. It almost guarantees the kid will spell the word wrong next time. How do I know that what I or others are saying is true? And does that make sense? Come back to me on point 3. Okay, come back to me. On point 3, how do I know that what others are saying is true? I've been through this nutrition thing a long time. I don't want to upset too many of the nutritionists, but I don't believe any of them. Let me put it this way. The goal of this course, you're going to have to assume that I don't believe anything that anybody says until they show it to me, okay? But let me tell you something about nutrition. When I was a kid, okay, a long time ago, in the 50s, right? The school nurse, there were no such thing as dietitians. There were or if there were, they weren't in my school. So I guess there were, but they didn't work in schools, mostly in hospitals and stuff. But anyway, the school nurse would come in with her eyes shining with a light of truth in them and say, here, I'm going to stand up, okay? I'm going to stand up. These, and she'd put posters on the wall, these are the 4 basic food groups. To be healthy, you must eat every day from the 4 basic food groups. The 4 basic food groups. Now they tell you eat from 2 of them, you'll drop dead from a heart attack on the spot. Red meat, right? And lots of dairy products. There was a commercial on TV, milk, the perfect food. Now you're told, you drink whole milk, you'll clog up every vein in your body, every artery, everything. It'll be clogged up beyond hope. Right? Red meat, horrible stuff. So how do we know it's true? By the way, I got to tell you about eggs. Eggs are healthy, eggs are not healthy, eggs are healthy, and eggs are not healthy. I've been through it about 18 times, okay? So you got to ask yourself, be careful. Just because everybody's on a bandwagon doesn't mean that they're right, okay? People think a lot of things for a long time, and then they turn out not to be so. And the next one, I'm sitting down again. The next one is, does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. I picked these questions because I think they have a lot to do with how our schools and our educational institutions run. The answer in our education often is no. These things don't make sense. Or there's another one, what does that mean? Okay? What are you talking about? I don't get it. That kid needs structure. What do you mean by that? I'm not sure what you're talking about. There, okay. Those people came in like there are a few desks, a few empty seats. All right, never mind. Do it your own way. Okay? So you have to be careful. Just to give you a hint, I always vow not to do this. Okay? Never mind. I'm going to wait until the end. Okay, there's a lot that doesn't make sense. Okay, I'll just give you a little hint. It seems to me, we're going to go over it soon, that the whole edifice of learning disabilities doesn't make sense. I can't understand what you're talking about. The terms are, there's a lot of stuff is screwball here. But we'll get to that. Okay, back to the PowerPoint if you don't mind. Okay, so we're going to undertake this study by investigating and contrasting psychological theories that have relevance for educational thinking and practice. Okay, and as I said, these theories lead you to many different places. Some theories say teach knowledge, which is clearly what's going on in Texas today. You know, remember the stuff and take the, what do they call it, the tacky test? Then, I used to get at least a little laugh the first time I used that term. Okay, other people are going to say, no, it's got to be understanding, creativity, generating new ideas, emotional health, other kinds of things. Okay, we're going to also examine some current educational practices from a psychological perspective and examine them, you know, critically. Critically, by the way, to examine something critically doesn't mean, can you get my picture in there? Thanks. Doesn't mean, hey man, that stinks. Okay? I had a teacher came to me and she was trying to get the kids to critique each other's writing. She said the first comment she got was, hey man, that story sucked. She said I had to take a long time to teach them how to critique intelligently, okay? So I'm going to try to do it intelligently. You'll see from that. Okay, and it's our hope, those of us who are teaching the course, that by the end of the course you'll be more informed with regard to psychological theories, how they should inform methods and frameworks used in schools and in other educational settings. Okay. Okay, but more than that, we want you to start to develop or to continue to develop a philosophy of education, what you're trying to achieve, why you're doing what you're doing, what's your goal as an educator, other than to collect a paycheck. That's a very important goal, but that shouldn't be the only one. Okay? Okay, come back to me now. Now we're going to take a little vote here, and I want you to vote. Okay? We're going to use the word science. Science. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mention some disciplines. I'm going to write them down for my own edification here. I'm going to mention some disciplines, and then you're going to tell me whether or not you think that discipline is a science. Okay? Okay, so let's start. I'm just writing it down for myself. I messed up already. Let's start with physics. Who thinks that physics... Oh, I see what I'm doing wrong. Who thinks that physics is a science? Raise your hand if you think yes. Anybody think no? Let's try the next one. Biology. Who thinks biology is a science? Anybody think no? Let's try another one. Literary criticism. I keep hitting this thing. Wait, I know what to do. Literary criticism. Boy, they got a good crew back there. They're on top of that. Okay. Who thinks yes? Nobody? I'm not going to even think that. I guess that's everyone. Let's try another one. Astrology. Okay, wait a second. Not astronomy, astrology. When the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns with Mars. You know that one. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. You probably don't even know that song's from. It's from Hair, right? This is your planet rising. Who thinks astrology is a science? Raise your hand if you think astrology is a science. Who thinks no? You have to vote. Who thinks yes? Who thinks no? Probably about 70-30, 80-20. Okay, let's try another one. This one ought to be a slam dunk. Political science. It says science in its title. Who thinks yes? One person. Who thinks no? Okay. Okay. For you, I get 5. Okay. Okay. And of course, you know where this is going. Psychology. Here, let's do this in big letters. Psychology. This is the course in educational psychology. I shouldn't look. Okay, let's take the vote. Who thinks yes? Who thinks no? All right, I'm going to close my eyes. Who thinks yes? Who thinks no? Did the vote change? There weren't more no's? Okay. So here's the big question. How do you know? Let's try one more. Let's try one more, okay? Theology. Oops, I keep hitting that gizmo on the pencil. Who votes yes? Theology, sort of religion. Who votes yes? About 7, 8 people. Who votes no? Most people. Okay, let's go back. How do you know? What determines whether a discipline is a science or not? How do you know? What characterizes a science? Go ahead, somebody give it a shot. Go ahead, push down on the little button there.
The scientific process.
The scientific process.
You assume you have some subjective approach to what you're studying, and you try to understand it through the facts as you can find them.
Okay, so he talks about facts, gathering data, facts, okay? That's one thing that's important about science, gathering data. That kind of pretty much disqualifies theology. Right? We're going to gather some evidence. If it comes out this way, there is a God. We're going to do an experiment. If it comes out this way, there is a God. If it comes out that way, there isn't a God. Okay, if it comes out that there is a God, then we're going to do an experiment. If it comes out this way, this is the right religion. If it comes out that way, that's the right religion. That's not going to happen, right? That's not going to happen. Okay? That's not to say that something that's non-scientific doesn't have standards. Theology is actually a branch of philosophy, of axiology, right? The philosophy of morality in many cases. It's the nature of God. And there are standards in theology. So if I were to take 2 treatises on Christian theology and give them to 10 top Christian theologians, and they all said, Treatise A is a very good discussion, Treatise B stinks. Okay, it's just lousy theology. And then I were to take them and give them to top theologians who are Hindus and Buddhists and Jews and Muslims and all that kind of stuff, and I would say to them, what do you think of these 2 treatises? They would come to the same conclusion. They would say, look, we may not agree with the underlying premises of Christianity, but given those premises, they would all say A is good and B stinks. Because there are standards in theology, but it's not science. Okay, so you gather evidence. Tell me your name. Dane. Push it down.
Dane.
Dane? Dane fails the course because he gave the thing away right up front. Okay, but I was ignoring the first thing you said, you noticed. Shh. Okay, right. Okay, so in the end we collect facts. Okay, we collect evidence, data. We try to collect data. Okay, that makes something a science. And he gave it away already. He called it the scientific process. Most people call it the scientific method. We do it in a way in which we attempt to have a certain amount of, there's a certain process or method that we use in order to gather the data. Just gathering data, not enough. Okay, so I can gather data and I can say, all the people, all the men in this room all the men in this room without beards, which is everyone but me. Oh, there are 2 of us. Okay, he has a beard. Good for you. I want you to know that large mammals, God gave the male of all large mammals hair on the face or the neck to make the male beautiful. And only one species is stupid enough to take a knife and scrape it off to be ugly. right? Those of us who keep it are beautiful, right? Okay, so that, let's say he wasn't here, he's the only one with a beard. All the males in this room who don't have beards have no gray in their hair. Let's pretend you're not here, okay? And the male in this room who does have a beard has gray in his hair. So therefore, I've observed that, it's data, and so my conclusion is that growing a beard makes your hair gray. Okay, now the data are pretty good, but the conclusion stinks, and even the way I gathered the data stinks. Okay, so it's not just gathering the data. So I have to gather the data by a certain method. And we don't have time to go into that completely. Most of you know about this, the scientific method with experiments, with conclusions, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go back to our list here. Okay, physics and biology. Here, let's do this. They are sciences. Literary criticism is not. Okay? Theology, we decided, is not. Astrology is not. Astrologers collect data. They collect data, but not according to the scientific method. Okay? Theology is not, because it's, as I said, it doesn't. Political science started out, it claimed to be. Let me come back to me about political science. The scientific method was developed, by the way, it didn't come out of the sky. It wasn't dropped down from some angel. It was developed a long time, over a long period of time, by making a lot of mistakes and saying, we made this mistake, we thought this was true, we didn't do it, right? So, for instance, most of you know that when you test a pill, here, wait a second, I want to go to a new page. Is this a new page? How do I get a new page here? There we go. Okay. Who knows what the word placebo means? What's a placebo? Who knows? Okay, tell us.
It's a sugar pill or something to make you psychologically believe you're taking the real drug, but you're really not.
Exactly. They used to do experiments where they give, like, for pain, is your pain relieved? So they give some people a pill, other people not a pill, and sure enough, the pill worked. Whatever pill they developed works. Finally, somebody said, I'm going to just give people sugar pills and see if they work. They worked. So what she said afterwards about psychologically thinking, I'll tell you the best placebo effect I ever saw. I'm not exaggerating. I used to work in a clinic with a bunch of therapists and me. I did the educational stuff. And I walk one day, and there's a guy sitting in the waiting room going like this. He's waiting for his appointment. It was like out of a bad movie. It looked like a Three Stooges. It was awful. This guy had been, I went in and asked what was going on a quarter of a milligram of Valium. Right? Quarter of a milligram. Trying to change someone's mood with a quarter of a milligram of Valium is like trying to change the color of the Pacific Ocean by dumping in a bowl of red Jell-O, right? Does nothing. It's a subclinical. 5 milligrams of Valium is considered the very smallest dose that can have any effect, right? The doctor used to give it to him and he said, I want you to give me a prescription I can take to the drugstore, because he didn't believe the pharmacist. And the pharmacist called up the doctor. He said, what's going on here? He said, you sure you didn't mean 50, not 0.5? 25, not 0.25? That's 25 milligrams. That's a dose you give. No. So the guy used to pay a fortune because the pharmacist would compound it. Once he's got the prescription, he's got to do it for real. He'd compound it and put the quarter of a milligram of it. No, man. One day the doctor got sick of it. The pharmacist got sick of it. So he said, I have a pill here. It's a brand new pill. I would send samples. Try it and see if it works. It's a great pill. Works better than Valium. And the demonstration I gave you was the result of that. Unless he could take that to the drugstore and get real medicine, right? That's a placebo effect. Okay? That was learned the hard way. After a whole bunches of medicine that they thought worked didn't. Right? Control groups. Once they wanted to do an experiment. You tell me if this is a good experiment or not. They wanted to do what they called in the old days a civics program. Now we call it a government program, to see what kids knew about the American government. So they took, and they planned for it. This was in education. They had an end-of-the-year test about what the kids knew about civics, okay, a pre-test and a post-test, and they gave it to the kids in the 7th grade. I think it was the 7th or the 8th grade. Let's pretend it's the 7th. And then the next year, they implemented this new curriculum, took a pre-test and a post-test, and sure enough, the kids learned more. The second year, the kids knew more about, they got higher grades on the average than the kids the previous year. And they said, oh, this is a better curriculum. I'll tell you right up front, that experiment stinks. It wasn't true. What's wrong with that? Comparing this year's 7th graders to last year's 7th graders. Say it again, push it down, push it down.
It's a different group of people.
Right, but you always have two different group of people to do an experiment. If I want to compare a pill, whether this pill works, whether it doesn't, does this pill work to cure eczema? So I'm going to take people with eczema, I'm going to have a group that gets my cream and one group that gets my pill and one that gets a placebo, right?
They have different backgrounds. Their knowledge could be
How do you have to get the two groups in a scientific experiment? You have to randomly assign them, right? You all heard about that? That didn't come from nothing. That came from the mistakes of the... Finally, some stinker went in and said, I want to see item by item where the kids improved. Virtually all the improvement had to do with presidential elections. And guess what? The class's second year was in a year where there was a presidential elections. In those days, people didn't start running for president 10 minutes after the guy was elected, right? What primaries were and what conventions were and how they would... how caucuses worked, all that stuff. They knew that because they were watching it on television or listening to it on the radio, reading it in the newspaper. Okay? It's called history, where they were two different experiences. You didn't randomly assign them. That was learned the hard way, all of this the hard way. So we try to use a scientific method now. How do I go back up? Oh, I see what I can do here. How do I get this to go back up? All right, here we go. Let's go back here. Okay, so political science and psychology. Okay, these two, come back to me for a second. Political science and psychology were an attempt to say, you know, physics and biology and chemistry have found out so much about their fields of endeavor. Maybe we can use the scientific method to find out about human experiences. And so there were now let's call them the social sciences. One said, let's look at human societies and see if we can apply scientific methods to examine human societies. That was called... Somebody push a button down and say it.
Sociology.
Sociology, right. Then, and other people, and at that time they said we're going to do modern societies and what they call, quote unquote, primitive societies. The ones who study primitive societies call themselves anthropologists. Now those two are, right, anthropologists begin to realize that what's primitive and not primitive is really a matter of, you know, of opinion. But in any case, so they examine societies, although they use different vocabulary and certain things like anthropologists will, archaeology is a sub-branch of anthropology. You tend not to find sociologists trying to dig up things, but they can. Okay? Then somebody said, let's examine the political behavior of people. That was political science. Some people said, let's use the scientific method to examine the economic behavior of people. That became economics. And psychology said, let's use it to examine people's individual behavior. Okay? Let's use it to examine people's emotions, people's feelings, people's thinking, to examine the individual psychology. And there's one cross. At some point, the sociologists and psychologists got together and made social psychology. Let's look at individual behavior in small groups, in groups, etc. Some historians say that they're scientists. Some say they're not. My bachelor's degree is in history, and if you would say that history is a science in my place, in the class, the professor would take the textbook and beat you bloody over the head, right? That's right out of the program. We're not science. Now, again, the historians who say they're not scientists have very clear methods and messages. Their message of what they're trying to do is clear, and you can do good or bad here, but it's not science, right? They don't like use scientific techniques, and I, frankly, can sympathize with them. Now, scientists, a good scientist will tell, social scientists will tell you, look, I don't say, or at least this one will tell you, I don't say that it's where all of human knowledge comes. Knowledge about human beings. You can get a lot of insights into humans from literature, from art, from music, in my personal opinion, from theology, okay? I think that psychology as a science has neglected spirituality, not neglect, hasn't put enough time into it. There are people who deal with that, but not enough. So there are other ways to get insights into you, but at least we're going to apply that. Now, some of these, most of you, only one person voted for political science. The rest of you said, because to some extent, what the nature of science is not clear. To some extent, people in the social sciences have violated this. There are a lot of people now criticizing economics because it's more about formulas than actual behavior. Because if you're a science, you have to deal with actual behavior, actual thoughts, actual feeling, what's actually going on. As you will find out, I do not think psychology is a behavioral science, because I think there are things more important than behavior. But that's something else. Okay? And then, of course, we have people trying to apply this. So, from my point of view, the person who's a therapist is not a scientist, even though he or she will call him or herself a psychologist. And that's the last him or her we're going to do. So, just like you have physicists like Einstein, let's say, or Bohr, right, getting principles, and then you have people who are brilliant technologists, like the Wright brothers or Edison. Edison wasn't really a scientist. He didn't discover scientific principles, but he was brilliant in figuring out if this is true and this is true and this is true, to do this and this and this and turn this handle, I got a gramophone, right? If this is true and this is true and this is true, then something ought to burn in a gramophone is like an old record player. Then something ought to glow in a vacuum and glow and glow and glow. And so he was just, right? So we have scientists who try to figure out basic principles of science, and then we have the psychologists who try to figure out the basic principles of psychology, and then what I call the implementers. Now, psychology has a hard job. First of all, it hasn't been around as long as physics and biology and astronomy and chemistry. And secondly, the subject matter is more difficult. Okay? I know you may laugh at that, but look, I know that physicists will tell you that one carbon atom is different from another carbon atom, but not as much different as people are from each other. If you're trying to get general rules of science, rules and ideas of what's going on, it's a lot more difficult to do it for people than for carbon atoms, all right, or for chemical reactions. Okay, so let's go back to the PowerPoint, okay? So what I want to talk about now, okay, is the scientific method and certain violations of the scientific method. Okay? There are many, many violations of the scientific method. Come back to me for one more second. There's one other thing I want to say. Astrology, for instance, is not a science because it doesn't agree to collect data or draw conclusions the way scientists do. I think astrology is a bunch of baloney. But that's just my personal opinion. Psychologists are upfront about what they do, about how they do it, and you can take it or leave it. I leave it. I think it's hooey. Okay? But it's honest. It's honest. They say what they do. I look at what they do. I don't think there's any merit to it. Finished. Other people may think there's merit. Finished. What really bothers me, and what you really have to worry about, but the astrologers, they're honest, okay, about how they do it. Ask them when planet's rising, when you were born, this and that, is people who violate the scientific method and then use scientific-sounding terms and pseudoscience to make you believe that they actually have scientific backing, and they don't. Okay? Since the Greeks, we've pretty much known the rules of logic for drawing conclusions. We'll get to that. The one that's been added, one of the major ones that's been added that the Greeks didn't have is blinding with science. Throwing a bunch of garbage at you that sounds scientific, you say, oh, wow, and it's not. Okay, so I want to talk now about violations of the scientific method. I can't talk about all of them. We okay, our whole course on the scientific method. We're going to pin down some of them that are used consistently in various educational backgrounds and warn you about them, hopefully. So let's go back to the PowerPoint, okay? And I call this How to Arrive at Absolutely Incorrect Conclusions, okay? That's the violation. I just want to see if it's big. I turned my head. I know I shouldn't do it. Okay? This is a good. If you know how to violate the scientific method well, you can scam people into believing almost anything, right? Even when it's a bunch of hooey. Okay? Now, or how to know things that just ain't so. You'll notice in the beginning of the Think book, which I'm quite confident I'll be using as long as this tape is running, there's a quote by Artemus Ward which says, "It's not what you don't know that hurts you. It's what you do know that just ain't so." Artemus Ward was Lincoln's favorite humorist. Okay? So, for instance, I have no problems with statistics. With the new sophisticated statistics and testing methods, I have no trouble. I don't know anything about them, right? Particularly in the testing method. And I have a statistician who works in our department, and whenever a problem comes up, I go knock on his door and ask him, right? Because I know I don't know. So I don't go off the deep end with it. But if I thought I knew and I didn't, and I start doing statistical analyses, and they're the wrong one. Okay. Now, I'm going to divide these. You're going to have to get my picture out of there for 1 second. These violations into two categories. And again, this is not anywhere near a comprehensive list, but it's the kinds of things that you will see that we often do in education. I want to warn you about and that you're going to hear, okay, in your other courses and as you go through being teachers or nutritionists or psychologists, counselors, or whatever, or adult educators. What I'm going to call unacceptable evidence and unacceptable explanations. This is Lieberman's not widely accepted way of dividing these things. These are all really, seen as violations of the same category, but I'm doing this for simplicity, so if you never see this in a book, you'll know why. Okay. Okay, let's get my picture back there if you can. We're going to start with the unacceptable evidence. Okay, I'm going to talk about 4 kinds of unacceptable evidence. Yeah. Okay. We'll do them one at a time. Anecdotal evidence, which is the same thing as personal testimony. Expert testimony. Common sense and common knowledge. Okay, let's do these one at a time. And the person who asked me whether the slides are going to be in order, no, because you can see I have links here. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, anecdotal evidence. And anecdotal evidence is personal experience. Personal experience is not evidence. People have different personal experiences, and often they are not objective about these experiences. Okay, come back to me. Okay. When you look, half of the commercials that you see on TV are anecdotal evidence, right? Guys, somebody stands up and says, "I weighed 782 pounds last week. I took Dr. Ding-a-ling's medicine, and look at me now," comes out like that, right? "I took this pill, I took that pill, I took..." You know, it's at the bottom, written in print so small, right? It says, "Results may not be typical." No kidding, right? Which means we picked the 10 people that this worked with, right? Right? "Oh, I took this and it made me feel better. Oh, I took that and oh, I took this and look at my abs. Oh, I took this and look at this and I took..." That's person doesn't mean anything. Doesn't matter. Okay? Personal testimony doesn't count. Okay? It just doesn't count. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry about that. Okay? Even if it's wide personal testimony. Okay, let's go back to the overhead for a second. Many years ago, there was a medicine called Laetrile, which was a supposed medicine. Okay, come back to me. Which was an extract of apricot pits. All right, we'll take another vote. Who says apricot? And who says apricot? Who says apricot? Who says apricot? About 50-50. Who was born and raised in Houston says apricot? Who was born and raised in Houston says apricot. He's about 50-50. I can't figure out where it's from. It's not a regionalism. It's nothing. Anyway, I say apricot. Okay? It was an extract of apricot, and it was supposed to cure, help with cancer. And there was a famous actor at that time called Steve McQueen. I don't know if you know who Steve McQueen is. If you're smiling, it means you're older than 25. If you see The Great Escape, that's a great war movie. Steve McQueen's the guy on the motorcycle at the end. He's the American who, right, he's always having the escape plan, the guy with a baseball glove. He was a very famous actor. He was married to Ally McGraw. And he was, Steve McQueen was in the first movie called Bullitt, B-U-L-L-I-T, in which they actually put a camera on a car, and you're, going like this. Oh, God, you want to throw up. He was a very famous. The Thomas Crown Affair, did anybody ever see that? He was in the original one, right, which still holds the record for the longest kiss on screen, right? So he was a very famous actor. He got cancer. He died young, and he took Laetrile, and he swore that it made him better. Hundreds of people took Laetrile, and they swore that it made him better. The FDA wouldn't approve it, but you could get it in Mexico. And there were buses. People would rent buses to take people over the border here in Texas, over in Brownsville, to go to Matamoros, and in California, to go across the border into Tijuana, right? They would gather people from them, they would bust them down, cancer patients, and of course they were selling Laetrile across the border. And thousands of people swore that the Laetrile worked. The only time it didn't work is when they did scientific experiments. They'd give half the people Laetrile, cancer patients Laetrile, and half a placebo, and they would have blind measurement. That's very important. The doctors who were measuring the people and their symptoms and their lifespan and how they felt and reported, the doctors did not know who had taken which one. That's another mistake they used to make. You would know who got your medicine and who got the placebo, and all the medicine worked better. And it never made a difference. Never made a difference. It just didn't work. So you have to be careful about personal experience and personal testimony, and I said this, and right? And here, let's go back to the PowerPoint. There's another problem, as I mentioned briefly before. Personal success is not evidence. A particular learning technique may have worked for you, but that doesn't mean that it works for everyone or in every situation. In fact, it may not work for most people in your particular teaching, educational situation. Okay? Okay, come back to me. Teachers tend very strongly, especially new teachers, to rely on their own experience. Matter of fact, there have been some surveys that have said they rely more on that than what they learn in college of education. So I was yelling at you to listen in your classes, right? So, and just because something worked for you doesn't mean it's going to be for somebody else. Like technically, you didn't understand something. Also, the teacher said something. Okay, I remembered. In North America, there are very, very few rivers that flow north. Almost none. Okay? Unfortunately, I grew up in Rochester, New York, and Rochester's on a river that flows north. I think there may be one other. Okay? It flows out of the hills of Pennsylvania into the hills of New York. Yes, New York State has hills and lakes and a river. It's not all at Manhattan. And then into Lake Ontario. And I said, and we're in 7th grade history, how can a river flow north? How can it flow up? Right? It's flown up the map. How can a river flow up? And the teacher explaining to me, no, it's just, finally she put it on the floor. She said, now you have it. She put the map on the floor. I said, you got it? I said, yeah, now I get it. She said, it's on the floor. You can see where the brown is. That's the hills. That's the Allegheny Hills in Pennsylvania. And it's fine. I got it. She said, I'm going to pick it up and put it on the board so we can see it, but it's really not. Okay? Years later, I'm teaching, I think it was 5th grade, 7th grade, I can't remember, same thing. Kids said, how can a river flow north? We're studying about Africa. It must have been 5th grade. Right? How can the Nile River flow north? Right? Put it on the floor. And he was younger. He was the 5th grade. I was 7th. He looks, he said, I got it. He said, now it should be flowing. He said, okay, maybe. I put it on the board. He said, it's flowing up again. Finally, what I did, it didn't work. And he wasn't the only one. There were about 5 of them. They didn't get it. Finally, we put it back on the floor. I finally bought blocks. And I built up I got blocks the color of the map, right? The dark brown blocks. Then I put that up on. I pasted it on. Of course, it kept falling off, but it didn't matter. I said, you see now, it's still about half the kids got it. It worked great for me. They didn't get it at all. Okay, I tried. So you're never sure. So personal success is not evidence. Just because 1,000 people tell you something works or it's great, it's not evidence. Okay, let's go back here to the PowerPoint. These are not right. Expert testimony is not evidence. Oops. Let me try this again. Okay. Expert testimony, what people say is not to believe simply because they are claimed to be experts. This includes principals, supervisors, and every professor except me. Okay? All right? Experts have to present evidence too. Okay, unless there's evidence to back up a claim, scientists will not give credence to a claim no matter who is making it. Come back to me for a second. If we really had scientists, and one day Albert Einstein and Sir Isaac Newton walked into a scientific conference and said, by a miracle we came back from the dead, we've been meeting for 6 months, and this is our new theory of science. Right? Good scientists would say, that's nice, Al and Izzy, but where's your evidence? Got to have evidence. We don't care who we are. Okay? So today we have Hawking, one great scientist. He can't say anything unless it's supported by evidence. You have to have evidence. Okay? And people try to bull you over with personal testimony and being experts together. I've been in this business 26 years, and I've taught 842,000 kids, and in my experience, I know, right? Okay. And let's go back to the PowerPoint. Don't be overwhelmed by fancy jargon from people claiming to be experts. Obscure terms and fancy jargon. These are often people who try to make you think they have evidence because they're using, but that's not. Good scientists present evidence in ways that can be understood and that make sense. Now, come back to me for a second. You may say, well, gee, I see physics formulas in there. I don't understand the word. Well, it's because you're not a physicist. Don't panic. Okay? But when a physicist comes up with, a matter of fact, that was one of Einstein's things. Einstein really didn't like math. Right? He said. He hated it. He said it all his life. And one of the reasons was because it was important for him to put his formulations out in a way that other people could understand it. He got it. It hit him. He would say, I play with blocks in my... It was either he or Newton. I think it was Einstein. I play with blocks in my head, and then all of a sudden it hits me. Right? The blocks are the universe, right? And then I got to put it down on paper. But he had to do it so people would know. Okay, so fancy jargon doesn't count. Experts don't count. I don't care. And then you say, this person has a doctorate in nutritional biology and says that if you eat 18 bananas a day, it'll cure lumbago. I want to see I don't care if the person has 17 doctorates. Okay, that happens all the time. Okay? Let's try another one. Common sense. What seems to make sense is not evidence. Scientists rely on evidence, not what seems intuitively obvious to people. Okay? I'm going to give you an example, right? Come back to me. Scientists went out and tested, sociologists actually, 6 common sense notions. They only remember 2 of them. Okay? They got, I believe it was 75% of people say, yeah, that makes sense. It's common sense. This was during World War II. Okay? The first notion was, soldiers in the north, from the north, will fight better in Europe in the winter, where it's cold and snowy and freezing and all that kind of stuff. Right? Snow, those of you who are born and raised in Houston, that's white stuff that falls out of the sky. Go look up in a dictionary, an encyclopedia. Okay? They're used to it, right? And soldiers from the south have never seen it. Likewise, soldiers from the south will fight better in the South Pacific, where it's hot and miserable and muggy, than will soldiers from the north who have never experienced it. I remember the first day I got down here, This is being taped in the library. I was walking from the first day I got here. As soon as I got here early in the morning. I'm going at about 1 o'clock. I said, I'm going to go have lunch in the afternoon. It was August, right? So I'll go over to the library. I had to get a book, and I'll eat lunch there, and I'll get a snack thing. I got halfway. I got to those of you who know the campus, I got from the College of Education to what they call the pond, that fountain, and I said, I'm going to die. Right? I looked at the library and realized I would be in my grave before I got there. I looked back at the education building, too far. So I crawled into the old science building, I remember, and I was against the wall like this, right? Right under an air conditioning unit, right? I think people are looking at me, I didn't care, right? So you say, make common sense, right? Make sense to people, right? Except when they went to examine it, wasn't true. First of all, nobody from the South said, please make it 102 out in the humidity 98. And nobody from the North said, bring on the blizzards. Oh, what's a day without a blizzard? Everybody hated the rotten weather, right? But even though the soldiers from the South had never seen snow and they were shocked by it, and the soldiers from the North, like I was, shocked by the heat and the mugginess, when it came to performing, it didn't make any difference. So it makes it, but it didn't make any difference. You want to hear the second common sense notion? Negro soldiers will do better with white sergeants than with Negro sergeants because they're used to taking orders from white people, but they're not used to taking orders from other Negroes. We're talking about the 1940s, not the 1840s, right? This is 85% of people, 75% of people at least back that notion, okay? So they said, let's go check it. Okay, let's go check. So when they went and checked, and they asked the lieutenants, right? And the captains, usually the lieutenants are the other ones. And they asked the officers, and we looked at the performance, didn't make any difference. The first one still makes it. The second one we think is ridiculous. Because notions of common sense, often 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, right? 30 years after that was endorsed, people would say, what are you, nuts? Right? So common sense is always changing. So you have to be careful about common sense. Okay? And those are the exact questions that I gave you, right? Phrased the way they were. Okay? There were soldiers who screwed up, white soldiers and black soldiers. A very, very small amount. It had to be a small amount because we won the war, right? But it had nothing to do with what their sergeants looked like, or what they looked like, or where they were fighting, right? It had to do with other things. So let's go back to the PowerPoint for a second. What makes sense to one person may not make sense to another. Different people have different ideas of what constitutes common sense. And what constitutes common sense, obviously, with the second question I asked about black soldiers taking orders, right? They're always changing. By the way, I'm ready to bet if they had put out the other question and said, black soldiers will do better with black sergeants because they're more used to being with them and they're more comfortable with them, that people would have endorsed that as being common sense. You always find common sense on both sides, right? You got to go and get the evidence. And when people don't have evidence, they'll always say to you, well, how do you know? They'll say, what are you, an idiot? Use your common sense. Which means, if you disagree with me, you're an idiot. Right? I don't have any evidence. I don't know. Well, how do you know that's true? Use your common sense, which means, what are you, stupid? If you disagree with me, you're stupid. It's common sense. It's common sense. So, okay, come back to me. So you have to be very careful. Common sense doesn't count. You can make notions. You can say, hey, this seems what's reasonable to me, but you always have to be open to change your mind based on evidence. And it doesn't have to be a scientific experiment. If it makes sense to you that this is what it pays to do in class, you do it and it doesn't work, you need to say to yourself, hey, I'm ready to change my notion. Now, I got to tell you one other thing. Since the vast majority of people who are going to be in this class are going to be teachers, there are going to be English questions on the test. I'm going to tell you that right now. Okay? If you don't know the English language, you shouldn't be a teacher. If you have a college degree, you shouldn't be a teacher. So let's try one thing. We're going to take a vote now. He gave the ball to John and I, or he gave the ball to John and me? Who votes for John and I? Who votes for John and me? Amen. He gave the ball to me. So he gave the ball to John and me. Okay? Questions like that will be in the test. You got it? All of you, you got it? It's the object of the preposition to. Okay, next time we'll finish this. We'll continue with the scientific method. We'll continue with a few more things, and I will also inform you. I'll inform you right now. I will also inform you at that time, to prevent saying he, she, they, their, her, him, the rule that I have for when I use he and when I use she. And you're free to do that yourself on your papers. Okay, I'll see you next time. Have a good